Hey everybody, my name is Hallie and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you a positive home birth, water birth experience story that is my own. This is something that is super near and dear to my heart. I gave birth to my son about 3 months ago and it was a wonderful experience. I was having a home birth all along. I had planned on it and it worked out really well. And throughout my whole pregnancy, I really struggled to find enough stories that were positive accounts of natural birth. And this is one that I think can add to the list for other people when they're looking for stories to relate to and positive examples to emulate through thought before their experience. I think that really does help. Because if you worry and you're concerned about it, you're only going to run into trouble when you let fear creep in. But really, if you can just find positive stories and think positively about it, if something else were to happen, you can confront it when it does. But in the meantime, you can just set yourself up in a positive mindset to deal with it. Every Friday leading up to my birth, starting at about 35 weeks, I would have contractions. And I found out that this is called prodromal labor, and it can really drag on for quite some time. It is horrible because you think you're going into labor pretty much. We had several false alarms. And because we were having a home birth, we knew that we needed to be within the 37 weeks to 42 weeks range in order to make this happen at home. Otherwise, we would have had to go to the hospital, which I understand can be the case for a lot of home birth experiences that don't go your way. But we really wanted it to fall within that timeline and for us to be able to have our baby at home. And when these prodromal contractions would start at about 35 weeks, we'd have them for a couple days, and I would get a little concerned that it was early labor because they do increase, the frequency of them increases, and also the contractions become closer together. The one variable that I was missing was that they weren't becoming more intense, which is you need intensity, you need frequency, and you need them consistently. So this was what we were looking for when it came to my birth experience. With my midwife, we had discussed this, so we knew that I wasn't quite there when these started. And after the first couple weeks, I just started to become in denial. And once my due date had passed, I was really in denial. The week leading up to my birth, we really did not leave the house because I was determined that I was going to go into labor that week or on my due date, which I knew that wasn't the case, especially with home births. You can go up to 2 weeks later pretty frequently, especially for a first-time mom. But I was ready for it. And then once my due date passed, we just went and did life as normal, went out to eat, went and got groceries, did everything. The day of the birth, that night before, I woke up every couple hours with contractions. I'd been having contractions about 4 minutes apart for a few days. And on that Friday before, the birth was on a Sunday. That Friday before, we had the midwife come over and check me, and I was 4 centimeters, which I was pretty shocked about, but is pretty normal for prodromal labor. And at about 5-6 centimeters, active labor kicks in, which is when things start to get pretty real. So we were just kind of waiting and trying things that would kick it over the edge. I had done a chiropractic appointment one day, and then the next day I did an acupuncture treatment that was pretty intense, which I thought really kicked things off. The next day I did the blue and black cohosh, which I don't think did anything. And then on that Saturday, we were going to have to go for an induction on Monday, or at least to go get checked out and do the biophysical profile. So I was starting to lose hope and becoming pretty upset about the whole experience. And then we said, let's give it the weekend. Let's let the weekend be normal, not do anything, and see where we are. So Saturday and Sunday, we didn't do any special treatments. We just walked a little bit, ate food like normal. But yeah, Saturday night, going into Sunday morning, I was having 4-minute apart contractions that didn't feel real. I was pretty much in denial at this point. And I was letting my midwife know and my doula, but it didn't seem like anything was too serious to me. But I kind of wanted to be in denial, so I didn't get my hopes let down again. But we went to the grocery store that morning because all of a sudden I showered in the middle of the night and washed my hair, and I vacuumed that morning and did laundry at like 6 a.m. I was up every couple hours with these contractions, and I just felt that nesting urge that many people talk about, but I personally did not identify. Even with my experience in birth, I kind of looked past it because I'd felt like that on and off. Didn't want to get disappointed again. So I'm just going about life as normal. I felt like we needed to go to the grocery store, and I'm like, let's get some snacks just in case the birth is close. Otherwise, we'll just have food when we get back from the birth, and no biggie. Let's get some fruit and veggies and kind of some healthier snacks. And I had a very distinct need to make stuffed peppers. So I got all the ingredients to make stuffed peppers. When I got home, I was still having contractions. So I hurried up and made them, or prepped them, put them in the crock pot in the fridge, and I was gonna make them the next day. And because I really wanted a sandwich. So I went out and got like an Italian sub sandwich around noon or 1, and I was still having contractions. And then it kind of started to get a little bit more intense, but I still did not take it seriously. And at this point, I'd been leading my doula on for weeks, letting her know that I was having contractions here and there, and I think she was starting to get curious. So she said she was just gonna pop in for a visit just to say hi. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine, come on over. And that was about 1:30. So she got there at about 2:30, and I just was like, you can go, there's nothing happening here, we're just sitting around. And then all of a sudden she's talking to me, and I realize I'm like kind of having to focus on the contractions because they started to feel a bit more like period cramps. They were pretty intense. I would say it was like the first day period cramps situation. It was something where I'd have to close my eyes. I couldn't focus on what she was saying, and I was still in denial. I was in denial this whole time, pretty much. And she kind of noted what was going on. I think she was kind of giving my husband like the eyes, and then I admitted, oh, that was kind of an intense contraction. And she said, let's get on the ball, let's do some, hip squeezes, let's see how it goes, and I can always leave. And so that was about 3-4 o'clock. So she started doing the hip squeezing, and it felt much better. And then she looked at it, they started to get like double back contractions, like they would go one on top of the other, and then I'd get like a 30-second to a minute break. So it was pretty intense all of a sudden, but I still felt like they could build to that point and then decrease. The rate at which it was increasing, though, was surprising me. And I just remember having to really focus, and I kept telling myself it wasn't real. And then we came out into my living room, which I had prepped the whole dining room table with all the towels and everything I thought I needed for the home birth. And we'd moved the table aside so that there was enough room to have everyone in here, because we knew there'd be several midwives, a doula, my husband and I. We knew it'd kind of be chaos. So she looked at him and was like, you need to go fill up the tub. And we had like a kiddie pool. I'll discuss this in a later video about what kind of products we used for the birth. But we had a kiddie pool, and I had my husband blow it up weeks before, and we stored it in like an extra shower area. I just wanted it ready, and so we didn't have to blow it up when the time came. Thankfully, that worked out really well. But he came out to fill it up. We had the hose on the sink and that running into the tub. We had turned our hot water heater up. We were ready to go. And he was out here doing that while my doula and I were kind of focusing through contractions on the ball, and she was using a rebozo and a scarf and a baby blanket to all try to lift my belly up, because I had a really huge belly, and it felt great compared to what I was experiencing. So then we decided to come out into the dining room area. I was going to get ready to get in the pool. My midwife was on the way just to come check us. She didn't really think it was anything too serious. And at this point, I was 41 weeks and 2 days. So at 41 weeks and 3 days, you have to go to the hospital, and they're going to measure your contractions and see where you're at. That was just the agreement that my midwife had with the OBGYN at the nearby hospital. And in order to have everything go smoothly, that's what we needed to do. So it was the day before we would have had to go in for a potential induction. And at this point, I had given up. I had accepted that I might have a C-section, that I was going to just have to go with the flow. And I think that is really what brought labor on, is I was ready, my baby was ready. I had given up my control of the situation, and that's when everything took over. So my husband is setting up the pool. I get out in the dining room. I'm on the ball still, leaning over the dining room table with my doula. And I remember saying, this is about 4:30. And I remember saying, I'm leaving now. And they were like, where are you going? But I meant like mentally, I'm checking out. And my husband describes my personality during birth as a different person. And in the doula world, we always say you're in labor land, or there's a primal person that takes over and handles it. But I just remember saying, I'm leaving, I'm checking out. And that's a funny note, is because during this whole labor experience, I kept thinking I was saying things out loud, and apparently I was just saying them in my head, and I was very quiet. So I don't know if I really said that out loud, but I remember thinking I had made a point to say that, and my doula mentioned I said something similar. So we were going through contractions. I finally get to the room to get a bra top on, and I get in the pool. And right when I get in the pool at about 4:30, 5 maybe, my midwife comes in. And she's like, let's go check you. Let's just see where we're at, because I didn't want to do a lot of checks throughout the birth. So she checked me, and I was 5 centimeters, which was, in my mind, really defeating, because I had been 4 about 4 days prior. So I'm like, I haven't made any progress. These contractions aren't doing anything for me. And I just told myself, just let it go. You got to let it go. You got to go with it. And if this is real, you're going to know. And if it's not, then it'll eventually happen. But my doula was like, let's just get back in the tub. Let's go with this. I asked my midwife, I'm like, are you staying? And she's like, yeah, I'm staying. So at that point, I knew it was probably going to be a little bit more serious. And in my mind, I'd been to so many births that were 24 to 40 hours that I was prepping for this long marathon of what was to come, even with being at 5 centimeters. And I didn't know what to expect. And mentally hopped on board, signed up, and I was just along for the ride. I was just going to kind of, as all the books say, surrender to the experience and just go with the flow, really. And that's really what worked for me the whole time. I got back in the pool at about 5, and the whole time I was on my tailbone, leaning back position. My belly felt so heavy. I was talking in between contractions, kind of making jokes on and off, but I was still mentally pretty far away. And I just remember after our initial midwife had come in, we had another helper come in who was our childbirth educator, who was really funny. We really loved her. So it was great to have her come in and be in the room and in the space. And she came at about 6, 7 o'clock. And I had no concept of time at this point. I just was looking outside. And this whole time, there was a huge thunderstorm going on. The power was flicking on and off. It was just a little bit terrifying. I was like, what do we need? What do we need? Everybody was like, people give birth in huts. You're fine. There's nothing we need. We'll just have to get hot water for the birth tub if you want to stay in the birth tub. Other than that, we're okay. Everything we have runs on batteries. We'll be all right. And that really put my worry at bay. I was kind of enjoying it. I had dreams that I was going to birth my son in a really intense thunderstorm, and so it just felt like it was kind of meant to be. And I think that was when the lightning was coming out. I think that was something that really was comforting, was I knew this was what I was expecting. This is what was meant to be, really. And that was just the whole experience for me, was this is what is meant to be. What will happen will happen. And I just, in the contractions, would ride with the contraction up, and it would peak, and then it would come down. And I would just breathe through it, long breaths, and I'm in my head saying, this sucks. But no matter what, I really wanted to tell myself that this is intense. At no point did I want to say this was painful, and I still, looking back, would not call it painful. I would say that this is really intense. And I didn't want to think of it as pain because I didn't want to hold back or create resistance. I wanted this to be an intense experience, a powerful experience, but not one that I was pushing away from. So I guess at about 8 o'clock, we had a student midwife show up who immediately asked me if I wanted to be checked, and I told her, no, let's just see how we're doing. I really don't want to do any checks, but I get that that's kind of her lesson that she had learned through birth work. But I said, I just want to let my body do its thing. And at that point, I had looked at my other midwife who was resting on the couch at the time and said, hey, I kind of feel pushy. And she said, oh, then just push. If you feel like you need to push, push. And I'm like, no, I'm not even there yet. It's only been a couple hours. It had been like 3 hours at that point, maybe 4 hours. And I was like, there's no way that we're here yet. But she's like, just go for it. So each one I would push a little. And then about an hour into that, I became exhausted. And I just said, I can't push anymore. Like, oh, this is not good. Like, this is the end. And I was still back on my tailbone. And my doula was so wonderful. She was feeding me. And I kept throwing up throughout this whole experience. My husband would say, that was the only time you're lucid. And the whole thing is right after you would throw up is I would ask him, how's it going out there? How you doing? And he'd be like, good, you're doing great. And I was not aware that this was still a real experience. I kind of thought that I just wasn't feeling well and this was early labor potentially. And then everybody would have to leave and come back. But looking back now, I realized that I had told myself on one of the times I went to the bathroom with my husband, like I thought in my head, I thought I said this out loud. But I was like, I can't do this anymore. This is too hard. I'm going to quit. And then later I realized, which I had seen with many of my doula clients before, this was transition, which I did not realize I was that far along. This was at about 7, 8 o'clock. And I just had no idea that it was progressing so rapidly. So I got back in the tub, and this whole time I've been on my tailbone. So now my doula said, let's do one with squatting position, just push while we're in the squatting position. And I said, okay, whatever, I'll give it a shot. So she holds me and I'm squatting in the tub and I'm pushing down and my water breaks. And so everybody was kind of relieved. I was shocked that my water hadn't broken yet, but the pressure was relieved at that point and I was ready for shit to get real. At that point was what I thought, was there's no going back on this. And which was funny because I was almost at the end. But I decided, let's do some hands and knees. Everybody was really encouraging of that. The main midwife showed up, so we had 4 people, 4 birth attendants and a doula and us, so there were 7 of us here. And it was really a fun experience. We had gotten the snacks earlier that day and laid them out so everybody was snacking. The birth tub was set up in between the dining room and the kitchen in the corner, so it was kind of, I could see what was going on. I was underneath a big window and the storm was coming down on me from like visually, and it was a really cool look. But at this point it was about 8, I had got on my hands and knees and one of the midwives checked me and said, if you want to feel the head, you can feel the head. And mentally I'm like, I'm not going to put my hand all the way up there, that's way too far, I'm not going to do that. And I didn't realize at the time that I was almost done. He was already coming pretty much out. He was in the birth canal. So after a few pushes, I put my hand down and felt his head and was like kind of freaked out that he was so close. And I was probably about 9:30. And so then I decided I needed to get back in this position on my kind of resting back with like my chin tucked to keep pushing. And this was when they put the gloves on my husband. He was supposed to catch the baby, but I had grabbed him by the neck back here, and then I had my midwife right here, and everyone was around in the front kind of coaching, making sure everything was okay with the Doppler and everything. And at this point I remember saying, I started to cuss. I was like, shit. This is so wild. Like, this is getting real. And the only part I would say that truly hurt during the labor was the crowning. And everyone describes this to you. I still didn't realize how far along I was, so I was like, oh my God, it really burns. And they're like, have you heard of the Ring of Fire? And I said, yes. And they said, well, this is it. And at that point I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm already here. This is just so much. At about a half hour past 10, he's coming out. They're like, one more push and his head's out. So I push and his head comes out. You have to push again to get his body. And I lifted him up and it was amazing. I just remember looking at him like, oh my God. And I thought he was so big, but everybody said, no, he's going to be like 7 pounds, 8 pounds. But I looked at him and I said, I was just like, wow, he's such a big boy. And he was so cute. And it was just the most special moment. My husband was right here. Just everybody was so excited and so happy. And then he came right on my chest and then he pooped everywhere, which is pretty normal, but it was so cute. And he immediately latched and it was just the most perfect thing. And then I stayed in the pool for about 45 minutes to an hour until I delivered my placenta. And then I was able to get up, uh, just stand up and walk to my room. And my husband had taken the baby at that point with the placenta. And the placenta got to stay attached for about 2 hours until it was completely done throbbing and they cut it off. And he had pooped about 2 more times. And it was just a really great experience. I was pretty high after it on the endorphins, but I was so surprised at how good I felt compared to what I was expecting. But most of the birth experiences that I had seen personally were in hospitals and recovery after C-section, so I wasn't familiar with many natural birth recoveries except for just a few. And so this seemed more foreign to me. And I had never been to a home birth. And I think that was part of the reason I really wanted to have one for myself, was because I didn't have any prior connotations of what was supposed to happen besides just stories I'd heard. But I wanted to see it for myself through my own experience before I helped other women have their own home births, if that's what I do in the future. But I plan to continue being a doula later down the line when my son is a little bit older. But after the birth experience, we get into the bed, everybody tucks us in, and then we had a little bit of a shocker at the end, which was the main midwife, after she'd run all the baby tests and made sure I was okay, said, so the ambulance is going to be coming. And I was like, what? What's wrong? And she's like, no, it's not with you. One of the midwives had a cyst burst on her ovary, and it was extremely painful, and she was really sick. And little did we know, because she was our midwife the entire time and just acted so professionally, and we had no idea anything was wrong. And so they called the ambulance to show up with no sirens. Overall, it was a really beautiful experience, one that I wish could go as smoothly for many other women. I would go this route in the future as well because of how successful it was, as long as it felt right and was the right choice at the time for my family and I and the baby. I loved my experience, and I can't speak more highly of it. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm glad to share any more information with you. Other than that, good luck to you if you're on your pregnancy journey or in the future as well. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.